In this part 2 course for a modern IT support training under networking, we are going to create a project for DNS. The reason we are creating project for DNS is that DNS can be simple and it can be very advanced. What do I mean by this? So as an IT support professional, do you really need to know about DNS? Yes, for interviews and also when you're doing troubleshootings with other engineers, maybe they will tell you, hey, can you add this IP address in the DNS section? Now, automatically that engineer assume that at least you know this knowledge. In the client system, where do you put this IP address, right? So if you know about DNS even further than that, then what happens is that at least it's a confidence for you. It's something that you understand how computers are connecting, how they're working, how DNS is important. So when there's an issue, even if it's a basic issue, it could be an advanced issue, at least you know some sort of knowledge so you can assign it to a proper person, or maybe it is you that you need to fix it. So the project outcome is for IT support professionals. My assumption is that in this part 2 course, you went ahead and you understood what the lecture is about. Then also you perform this lab, which is configuring and maintaining DNS server. Now you must be asking this question, as an IT support, do I really need to have this? Like, do I need to do things like this? Not at all. I mean, naturally and normally, we do not ask IT support professionals to touch DNS at all. You probably won't even have access to DNS, specifically DNS servers. This is something a systems administrator, a person who maintains servers, will be doing this type of labs. But then why are you doing it? You're doing this because when you understand things from lecture and then you actually go ahead and touch DNS server and you play around with it, then you are not scared of the things that you haven't seen. And when you go to work, you're more confident and you're always thinking for upgrading your skills to become that sysadmin or network engineer later on. So this is the beauty of this type of labs, that you're given something more advanced and you will be following step by step. So maybe half of the things may not make any sense to you. Just do it, and let's say you got the hands-on done. And now in this project, I'm going to cover most of the IT support sections in DNS, so then it's going to make it very clear for you. At least at this level, you will have a good understanding. So let's go ahead and let's open our Sandbox lab, and then let's get started with the project. So we're going to go back, and I'm just going to click on Practice Labs, and I'm going to open the Sandbox lab that you have access in Lite membership or Premium membership. So in the search section, I'm going to type Sandbox, and we are going to open the PLab server 2019 server. This is the one that we're using for Sandbox. So I'm going to click on launch, and here is our practice lab, the Sandbox. So once you launch it, you should see this. If for some reason your launch button is not working, you can check your pop-up blocker or contact support@jobskillshare.org if there's any issue. Or you can, let's say if you don't want to wait, you can use your manual access by clicking this link. Use the username and password given over here, the domain, and you should be able to log in and then search for this lab inside the lab system, and you should open it and you will see the same screen. So let's go ahead and launch this lab. So now we have this lab. As you can see in the practice lab, we already get a domain controller, and we already get other machines that are connected to this domain controller. So by default, we have some sort of connections and DNS type of things are working in this lab. So let's see, we're going to turn on all these labs and I'm going to show it to you. So let's go ahead and turn on all of this. And at this point, we're not covering anything Linux, so we'll leave that. And I'll wait for this lab to come up. It does take a little few seconds to come up because these are real systems, real machines. And there you go. One system just showed up. So right now we have this PLab DC01. By now you already know what is Active Directory, these machines and everything. I don't need to explain that. This is part 2 course. You probably have done a lot of these labs before in part 1. So we will not waste our time explaining anything basic at this point. So when I mentioned in the beginning that as an IT support professional, you will not be getting access to a server where the DNS is, this is something a sysadmin will be getting access. I'm talking about this server. In real systems, you will not get access to this server. You will get access to a powerful machine, which is going to be IT support machine. You will have a lot of access with somebody creating the Windows 10 for you, and then they will give you access, username and password. You will have a lot of access, but then you will be accessing certain features like Active Directory limited, group policy limited, depending on what they want to give you. From this machine you can access it, right? So DNS type of skills, again, like if there is a DNS issue with the server, so this is not your issue. You just have to know that this is outside of your skill set, or this is outside of your access, and then you will assign that ticket to a systems administrator. So then where do we really need to learn about DNS as an IT support professional? Normally, if somebody wants to test you for IT interview, IT support interview, or maybe you got a basic call with the engineer remotely, and engineer say, hey, I want you to add this specific IP address in your client machine or your machine because I want to test something for this specific issue. So then where do you need to change DNS settings in Windows 10? So there are many ways to get to that DNS section where you're working with an engineer and they say, hey, can you change this IP address for DNS? And they'll give you the IP address. The easy way is to run a command like this. Just type CMD, right click, and run as administrator. And in your command line, you can type this command, which is basically ncpa, just like that. You're going to type it, ncpa.cpl, and enter. So when you enter, you see it just directly opens an Ethernet without you going through so many different steps. Or you could open control panel and click on view network settings. So usually when you open a control panel homepage, it looks like this. This is something you can search in the search right now. Click on control panel, go to network, internet, then click on view network status and task. In the new methods, of course, new screens also comes with a way to do this by open network and settings. And then there is basically Ethernet as well, and you can open it from here. But of course, in the new settings, if you have a administrator account, local administrator, it may give you an error like this one. Let me show it to you. You have to log in, and you can change this permission from group policy or local policy, but you don't have to do that right now. If you can open it through that command line, I think I'd suggest you to do that. So now, again, we're going to type this command. We're going to open it. There you go. So we right click. So now the engineer expect you to know this skill, right? They're going to say, hey, I got this IP address. I want you to change the IP address in DNS. So you right click, you go to properties, and you go to TCP version v4, and we're going to basically click on properties, and then there you go. There's this DNS server right here. So this is important, because if you don't know this, then the other engineer may expect you, okay, you don't know a very basic skill right here, because they do troubleshooting, they have different needs for this to happen. Maybe they cannot take a hold of that machine remotely while you're on that machine physically, and you opened it for that engineer, and they want you to put these IP addresses because they need to get into that machine somehow, whatever the reason is. So there's a IP addresses. We're going to touch this later in our different project, but here's the DNS right here. If I remove this DNS from here, then it may not work, right? So if, right now it's basically grayed out. If I removed it, it may not work, and that's how things can stop working. But since I have it here, that where I know that I can get to this place and put it for the client or the engineers, and then they can take over whatever they want to test. The next thing is maybe they want you to go to the advanced settings, and they also want you to add a DNS right here. So this is another section where some companies may want you to put IP addresses, server addresses in this section, where you can add it right here in this section. And that's where things can basically, when they say, hey, I want you to go to a DNS, but I want you to go to an advanced DNS settings. So then how do you know these things? This is what we are doing right now. So you will be doing this type of things with other people if they require you to know this knowledge.
Another common request you can get from an engineer or systems administrator, if you're working with them remotely and they don't have access to your computer, they may ask you, can you tell me the DNS address on this machine? So yes, you went to the Ethernet that I showed you first. That's one way. But in many companies, we're using DHCP, which you're going to learn after this chapter as well. which is automatic assignment of that IP address. So this means you are going to get an IP addresses automatically, and also the DNS address is automatically assigned because it's done through the network. So when your computer is connected, when somebody connects your computer to that specific internet, for example, just look at your home computer. If you go to your home computer and you open network access, most likely you will not see any addresses. That's because your router at home has everything automatically done. So when you say, I want to connect to this Wi-Fi, it gives you IP address and it also gives you the DNS address. So you don't have to, you will not see manually in that Ethernet that I showed you first. So now that could be an interview quiz just for people to know, do you even know how to run a command to find these things? These are very basic things. So to do that, you will need to go to CMD just like this. So you probably learn a lot from part 1 courses. You know how to find an IP address, right? This is so basic because you have done this in part 1. So people can say, what is the IP address of your computer? You can do that in your home computer right now, and you will get some sort of address like this. But if you look at it, these are IP addresses, default gateway. This would be your home router. If you're doing that, that would be going back to your Wi-Fi router that you're using. So now you're saying, hey, how do I find a DNS? So you see, now you need to know about the commands. You probably learned that in part 1 course. So what we need to do, we need to type ipconfig again / and we're going to do all. So now we're going to get more information from this computer. So if you were in front of interviewer, manager, or technical person, this person will already know now, okay, now you know your stuff. If you are on the call with an engineer, you will do the same process and you will say, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this. Give me 1 second. And our DNS server address is this right here. You see, I didn't have to go to the Ethernet, open everything, and then I have to go to TCP v4 and then find this address. I have it right here. And in most cases, like I said, that's not going to be there because it's automatically assigned. You will not see anything over there. So here you can come and find out in your network what is the assignment. Of course, other things like DHCP and everything will be also the same way, but we will go to that in the next project. Now, this is going to be beyond your access in most of the companies. But what if you are the one-man IT person and now you're like, okay, I do want to know where this 192.168.0.1 is coming from. What is that? Now in this lab, you know that your whole lab is basically, this is the king right here that has everything, right? So this is the client that we are on right now. I'm going to do this. This is the client that we are on right now. So this IP address is coming from here, this server. How do I know? I can go back and do ipconfig on this machine and it will give you this same address, 0.1. The address of this specific machine is what? 0.4. So now let's go and confirm, is that true? So I can go to plab DC01, which is our domain controller, and I can show it to you here. I'm going to go to CMD and type ipconfig, and you can see the IP address of this machine is 0.1. So where's the DNS? The DNS is right here. If you go back to the start, you can open it multiple ways. I will just show you from the server manager. And if we go back up, you see the DNS server is running on this. This is what indicates that. We can go to tools, DNS, and this is where everything is connected. So right now you can see all of this practicelab.com machines. So whenever you join the machine to this domain controller, it created that address. So you learned that from your lecture, the FQDN, the fully qualified domain name, domain system, people use that. So basically, if you come over here and you see, okay, I'm on plab win10. When we log into Active Directory, you see how it's connected here. It has an address. So if I double click on it, this is the full address right here, fully qualified domain name, FQDN. You probably heard that in lecture. and here's the address. So when somebody type plab win10 in the remote access, when you did that in part 1, how did it know? How did it connect it? It's because when you type this name, it has this address in there in this network. So that's why it was able to do that. And even if you're in the same network, of course, computers automatically connects to each other. Now you don't have to really do these things manually. This is somebody who's going to have a sysadmin skills. They're going to come over here. Like I mentioned before, that DNS, DHCP, Active Directory, you don't go directly to it like this unless you have some special access. So because this can be very messy if somebody doesn't know what they're doing and they come and start changing things, a lot of things can go wrong over here. So these are the addresses that basically gets added to DNS. Now for some reason, if we delete this and there's some issues going on, like DNS is having an issue, DNS services is having an issue. So this is a DNS server right here. You see all of these things like clear cache. This is somebody who have this sort of knowledge. Then they will come back over here as an administrator, and then they're going to start fixing things. But if let's say an issue is like you're trying to connect to a machine and it's not working, an issue is over here on a DNS level, then it's going to be a lot of machines. So you already will know automatically that this is not something you can fix. You have to get sysadmin involved in this to fix things. But if it's like only one machine, then maybe you'll have to kind of remove a machine from a domain, re-add it. Sometimes that works. If that's still not working, then maybe you need to contact somebody to help you out why these addresses are not updating. A lot of times, sometimes what happens is a computer will get dropped from Active Directory, or DNS might have some issues, and you will try to connect to a machine or try to log into a machine, and it may say that it's not working. So you'll have to do that, removing the machine from the domain and then re-adding the machine back to the domain, and that usually works. Sometimes a sysadmin will say, or somebody will say, or you yourself should know this, hey, clear the DNS cache because we updated our DNS server. So you're going to go back to your commands, ipconfig, and you're going to type flush DNS. So this is also a way to figure out some of the DNS issues, like right here, receive successfully flushed the DNS resolve a cache. So sometimes this can help too if you're having issues with having some different type of issues with the machine where you're logging in, you're doing things and it's not working. So this is something that you can run on this level. Now there's another thing about DNS too. DNS is not only limited to just computer, knowing computer names and everything. Remember, DNS is also a part of online websites. So if you go to jobskillshare.org, it has its own DNS. If you go to any other websites, it has a DNS domain name added to it. So the reason for that is that, again, it's the same concept that when you are connecting to this machine, you use plab win10. Most likely when you're doing RDP, you didn't use our IP address, which you could. So that's the same thing over here. We don't want to use numbers. So here we don't want to use numbers when we go to a website. We use jobskillshare.org, and then you basically get to that website. Now, other than this, there's really not much you can do with DNS. Of course, you can go to more details in it and try to play around with it, try to delete that entry, and then come back over here and see what happens. Restart the machine, try to log in with that machine, do all that sort of stuff, and find different type of errors if you can get. But of course, there's not much you can do other than this. Now, the last thing you can do is to, if there is issues with DNS, you can also go to events like this on a machine. So you can go to the event viewer.
Event viewer, you have learned from part 1. This is where you can see the logs or error logs, everything that happens in the computer, in Windows computer. It keeps a track of it. If there's an issue, even successful messages comes over here. So applications have issues, you're going to go to Windows log and it's going to show you errors or success information, security, systems. There's a lot of things that can give you more details. Right here you see the DNS client. There's a warning right here, so it fails to find a resource, things like that. So if you have some sort of issues where then you tried everything basic, like you removed the computer from a domain, re-added it, that didn't work, and other issues are still you're having it, then of course you need to kind of go in more detail. And this is something, of course, if you're too new to computers, too new to your job, it may not be an easy task. You probably need help from an experienced person to tell you exactly what's going on. And you also then you need to utilize communities like spiceworks.com. This is another open community where you have IT professionals from all around the world, and you have an issue, you just put it out there, give good details, and you will get response. So this kind of is really helpful when you are dealing with issues with the DNS or any other log systems. Then I think you should come over here and utilize this section where you can find more information. So go ahead and practice with just finding out what is DNS, where is DNS, Ethernet address, IPv4, where to plug the DNS in. At basic level, this is what you need to do. Other than that, try to learn more about DNS. The more you learn about DNS, the better it will be in the future.